This video was made possible thanks to CuriosityStream. Watch TLDR ad-free and get exclusive videos from us by signing up to the CuriosityStream Nebula Bundle deal at curiositystream.com/TLDREU. Over the last few days, you've likely seen a lot about Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the ongoing attempts to grab more control. A lot of this focus has been on the military side of things, which is obviously important. After all, it's the military conflict which is actively killing people and destroying parts of Ukraine. However, there's another important factor, and that's money. This whole conflict has been expensive for both countries, but notably Russia has been hit hard. They're not only footing the bill for their military, but also facing serious sanctions which are destroying the Russian economy. So let's split this video into three parts. Firstly, we're going to take a look at the sanctions imposed on Russia by the rest of the world in response to Putin's war against Ukraine. Secondly, we're going to take a look at how Russia's economy has responded. And then thirdly, we're going to look at whether Russia's economy can survive this war, and if so, how. So let's get into it, starting with the sanctions. As you probably already know, governments around the world have imposed a whole load of sanctions on Russia in response to Putin's war in Ukraine. This time though, unlike Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, it's not just the West who are sanctioning Russia. Western governments have been joined by a whole load of other countries. Monaco and Switzerland have committed to mirroring EU sanctions, while Singapore, Japan and South Korea have recently unveiled their own set of sanctions. Even China has limited dollar-denominated state bank financing for Russian commodities, presumably in anticipation of secondary sanctions. The Western sanctions, though, have been particularly hard, and they've included cutting certain Russian banks out of SWIFT, the international payments messaging system, freezing the assets of Russia's central bank, Ministry of Finance, National Wealth Fund, and basically every high-profile figure in the Russian government, including Putin himself, and restrictions on various Russian supermajors, including a whole host of Russian arms and manufacturing companies. They've also moved impressively fast. Less than a week ago, Biden was talking about how Europe wasn't ready to expel Russian banks from SWIFT because they were worried about Russian loans. And a week later, well, here we are. These sanctions were also accompanied by a whole load of action from private sector companies. Shell, BP and Equinor all exited their stakes from Russian gas producers, while both Visa and MasterCard blocked Russian banks from their networks. Now, we should say that these sanctions are very complicated, with a whole load of technical exemptions, but all you really need to understand is that these sanctions are unprecedented and economically destructive for Russia. And to prove that, let's start by looking at Russia's central bank. Part of the reason why Putin went ahead with his war with Ukraine was because Russia's central bank had accumulated a serious amount of foreign exchange reserves. On Thursday, when Russia invaded, it had foreign currency reserves totaling $630 billion, despite only being the 11th largest economy. Putin therefore thought that whatever sanctions the West imposed, assuming they didn't actually freeze central bank assets, he'd have enough foreign exchange reserves to finance his war and protect the Russian economy. Now, you might be thinking it was pretty silly of Putin to assume the West wouldn't freeze the central bank assets. But just a week ago, this did look like a pretty safe assumption. Just 4 countries' central banks have ever been this heavily sanctioned: Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, and Syria. And in all 4 cases, these countries have relatively small economies and were economically isolated beforehand. So the idea that the West would aggressively sanction the central bank of a G20 country that's so intertwined with the global economy seemed pretty unlikely. Unfortunately for Putin, though, that's exactly what happened. The West and Japan have frozen roughly half of Russia's central bank reserves, totaling some $300 billion. This will obviously really hurt Putin's ability to finance his war, which, given that it's apparently already taken longer than he imagined, is pretty terrible news for him. The other sanctions, which basically limit countries' abilities to trade with Russian banks and companies, are also bad news for Putin, because they drastically limit demand for Russia's currency, the ruble. That's why on Monday the ruble fell 40% to an all-time low of 118 ruble to the dollar, with Russia's central bank unable to use its foreign exchange reserves to prop up the currency. And this sort of currency depreciation is bad news for ordinary Russians, who are now looking at serious levels of inflation. But it's made worse by the fact that the Russian public hadn't been prepared for this at all. Russian state media has spent the last week insisting that Putin's war with Ukraine is a relatively minor special operation, leaving ordinary Russians unprepared for these wartime sanctions. To try and counter this and stem the currency collapse, though, Russia did three things. Firstly, it doubled interest rates from 9.5% to 20%. Secondly, they banned foreign investors from selling their Russian investments. Yep, you heard that right. If you owned Russian assets, you simply weren't allowed to sell them. While this might temporarily prop up the ruble, it's bound to discourage businesses from investing in Russia in the future, which is clearly a bad thing for Putin. Thirdly, they forced all Russian exporters to convert 80% of their foreign exchange reserves into the ruble. Essentially, that means that any Russian company selling goods abroad has to use 80% of their money to buy more rubles. Obviously, this artificially increases demand for, and therefore the value of, the ruble. But this only even works as long as Russia is still exporting a significant amount of stuff, especially oil and gas, which at the moment are exempt from Western sanctions. But this could change. And worryingly for Putin, even these drastic measures only pushed the ruble to 100 per dollar on Tuesday, still 25% below its January level. You get the point. Russia's economy is clearly struggling with the sanctions, so what happens next? Well, it most importantly depends on what happens on the battlefield. If Putin retreats, or some sort of ceasefire is agreed, then you can expect most of the sanctions to be lifted and economic life to return to something approaching normality. But if the war continues, as looks likely, then, well, who knows what happens? While some countries, including India, Pakistan and China, have made clear that they plan to continue trading with Russia, this position might change if the war intensifies. It's also possible that the West could introduce secondary sanctions on the countries which continue to trade with Russia, or the scale of fighting might just force those countries to reconsider their position. Ultimately, though, there's still a whole load of uncertainty. Uncertainty which is only going to continue hurting Russia, which is exactly what the sanctions were designed to do. It's not just the Russian economy, though. There's a whole load of speculation about what this means for the rest of the world, the potential for rising inflation, and even fuel and food scarcity. So we made a companion video to this one, which looks at the theorized impact of this conflict on the global economy. And that video is available exclusively on Nebula, the streaming service my creator friends and I teamed up to build, but we don't need to worry about demonetization or the algorithm. Over there, you can find all of our latest videos ad-free, and we're also starting to post exclusive Nebula Plus videos over there as well. It's not just us either. All of our favourite educational creators are there too, like Wendover Productions, Real Life Law, Polymatter, Legal Eagle, Half as Interesting, and many more. But wait, we said this video was brought to you by CuriosityStream, right? Well, as a platform full of the best documentaries available online, they naturally love educational creators like us. And as such, we've worked out a deal whereby if you sign up for CuriosityStream using the link in the description, you'll also get access to Nebula for free. That's not a trial either. You'll have access for as long as you're a CuriosityStream member. To make things even better, for a limited time they're offering a deal where you can get 26% off their already low price, making an entire year of both services less than $15. $15 for all of your favourite educational creators, as well as superb documentaries on CuriosityStream. Signing up at curiositystream.com/TLDREU or clicking the link below not only gets you the deal, but it also directly supports TLDR and other educational content creators on the platform, as well as getting you original content and an ad-free experience.